Part 10. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 91. Chapter 91. The Drunkard's Intention. Sulayun knew very well that he was in a dream. The Jinluan palace was tense. A man wearing a ghost mask slowly wiped away the blood on his hands, while Xiao Jin, who was sitting on the throne, had already turned pale and stared at the man. "Who are you? Since fourth brother has a guess, why do you need to ask me?" That's Xiao Shenjiao's voice. Sulayun's eyes widened. This should be what happened after her previous life and death. But wasn't Xiao Shenjiao dead long ago? Impossible. Impossible. Xiao Jin stepped back and waved one hand, as if resisting something. "Aren't you dead? I clearly saw it. Thanks to my fourth brother, I did die once." Xiao Shenjiao raised his hand and slowly took off his mask. The face that was revealed was shocking. A scar ran from the right eyebrow across the bridge of the nose and landed on the left side of the chin. In addition to this scar, there are many small scars on the cheek. Xiao Jin was frightened. But Xiao Shenjiao didn't give him much chance to react and stabbed his chest with his sword. "This is impossible." Xiao Jin vomited out a mouthful of blood and fell onto the throne, making no sound. The next second, Sulayun felt his eyes flicker and the scene changed. "These are the things of the Sun Mansion, and I consider them to be returned to their original owners." There was a somewhat sharp voice. Sulayun couldn't see clearly who was speaking, but he thought it sounded familiar. Xiao Shenjiao looked at the tombstone in front of him and sighed. "I promised Suye to protect his sister, but in the end it was still a step too late. Your Majesty has tried his best." The picture gradually fades away. Sulayun opened his eyes suddenly, and it was just getting dark outside. She stood up panting and poured herself a cup of tea. After drinking the herbal tea, her thoughts calmed down. What does that dream mean? The king of Jin, Xiao Shenjiao, who was apparently dead, actually came back from the dead and killed the king of Yu, Xiao Jin, who ascended the throne as emperor. Sulayun touched his rapidly beating heart and had some vague guesses in his mind. She realized that maybe the Sun family was already involved in the battle for the inheritance. "Miss, why are you awake? Are you having a nightmare?" Mammy Zhang heard the movement in the house, pushed the door open, and quickly took some clothes and put them on Sulayun. Sulayun looked at Nanny Zhang, who looked worried, and shook her head slightly. "Maybe it's because I went to bed early yesterday, it's nothing." "Then miss, please sleep a little longer, it's still early." Sulayun went back to bed. As soon as he closed his eyes, Xiao Shenjiao's face would appear in his mind. She could only keep her eyes open and slowly wait until dawn. After greeting the old lady, Sulayun changed his clothes and went out with Sun Gro. Go to the house of the Minister of Rites. The wife of the Minister of Rites had sent a greeting card before, so she made an appointment today. The carriage stopped at the door. There was already a servant waiting for her, and Mrs. Lin's personal maid Honggu was also waiting at the door. "Mrs. Su and Miss Su are here. My wife has been asking questions early this morning. Please come in quickly." Honggu took the two of them through the door and walked all the way to Mrs. Lin's yard. Soon we arrived at the yard. "Madam, Mrs. Su and Miss Su are here." The maid opened the curtain and welcomed the two people in. Mrs. Lin hurriedly put down the teacup in her hand, stood up and stepped forward. "In the past, I only saw Mrs. Su from a distance at banquets, and there was no chance to talk. Now that I saw her today, I finally understood why Lord Su was devoted to Mrs. Su. It's been like the same day for 20 years. Hearing this, Sulayun's expression changed slightly, but seeing Sun Gro's expression remained unchanged, she replied calmly, "Mrs. Lin is joking, you and Shangshu Lin are the ones who are enviable. Everyone knows that Mrs. Lin was injured after giving birth to her daughter and cannot regenerate. Lin Shangshu's parents tried to persuade him to take concubines several times, but Lin Shangshu refused. The couple loved each other as usual and raised their daughter. Mrs. Lin pursed her lips and smiled, with uncontrollable happiness on her face. Okay, let's not talk about this anymore. Honggu, go and serve tea. Mrs. Su, Miss Su, please sit down quickly. Such enthusiasm made Sun Jiaro more and more confused. Why did Mrs. Lin invite them here? Moreover, he specifically asked Yunur to come with him. But Mrs. Lin didn't seem to be in a hurry to talk. She took Sun Jiaro and chatted about matters in the inner house. Su Li also enjoyed his leisure time, holding the teacup and sipping it carefully. The sleeves were gently pulled away. She lowered her head and saw a round-faced, fair-skinned girl about 7 or 8 years old grinning at her. Miss, why are you here? When Honggu saw the little girl, she quickly stepped forward to pick her up, but the little girl stopped. He hugged Suleun's legs and said, I don't want to leave. This. Honggu looked at Suleun in embarrassment, and then at Mrs. Lin who had stopped talking. Ching Ching, come to mother. Mom, I like the smell of this sister, and I want to stay by her side. Lin Ching Ching climbed onto the chair next to Suleun and returned. Mrs. Su, I'm so sorry for making you laugh. It's fine. Sun Jiaro smiled. Suleun took off a sachet from his waist and said, is this what you smell? It smells so good, sister. Lin Qingqingbo blinked and stared at the sachet in Suleun's hand. Suleun handed the sachet over, then my sister will give the sachet to you. The little girl's eyes were full of likes, but she didn't reach out to take it. Instead, she looked at Mrs. Lin, as if waiting for her approval. Mrs. Lin, it's just a sachet, not valuable. Suleun looked at Mrs. Lin and explained. This girl has been spoiled by me. Mrs. Lin smiled helplessly. Ching Ching, remember what you should say when you take someone else's gift. Thanks. The little girl took the sachet with both hands and smiled sweetly at Suleun. Apparently the tutor is not bad. Mrs. Lin's eyes passed over the sachet, and then she said, I think the style of the sachet is unique. I wonder where the embroiderer made it? I'm thinking of custom making a few someday. Suleun nodded and said, Mrs. Lin, I sewed this in my spare time. It was not made by the embroiderer. So that's it. Speaking of which, at Mrs. Li's birthday party that day, Miss Su's double-sided embroidery was really outstanding. Until now, Sun Jiaro realized that Mrs. Lin's drunken intention was in Suleun's embroidery. Suleun smiled shyly. Mrs. Lin is so complimentary. Yunur just took advantage of it. I heard my mother say that Mrs. Lin's embroidery is the best in Beijing. Sun Jiaro smiled at Mrs. Lin, feeling helpless. Neither the Su family nor the Sun family have anything to do with the Ministry of Rights. She has never spoken to Mrs. Lin a few times. Mrs. Lin's embroidery is indeed very famous in Beijing, but she has never said such words to Yunur. Sure enough, my daughter agreed to go to the appointment, and she thought she had indeed hidden something from her. It's just related to embroidery. What's it about? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 92. Chapter 92 is not a good thing. Mrs. Lin covered her mouth and chuckled. She didn't know that this was a compliment. But when Suleun said this, he neither seemed flattering nor hypocritical, which was very useful to her. I also do handicrafts when I have nothing to do. It's just a joke passed around by everyone. Sister, my mother is lying. Lin Ching Ching smelled the aroma of the sachet and suddenly said something. The eyes of everyone present fell on Lin Ching Ching. Mrs. Lin looked a little embarrassed when she heard Lin Ching Ching continue. I heard from the wet nurse that my mother is always busy with embroidery these days and stays up late. Ching Ching, don't talk nonsense. After hearing her daughter's words, Mrs. Lin shook her head helplessly. Aunt Hong, take the lady back to her room. Yes. Hongwu stepped forward and pulled Lin Qingqing. Maybe she had a toy, or she saw Mrs. Lin's positive attitude. This time, Lin Qingqing did not refuse. Instead, she obediently took Honggu's hand and left Mrs. Lin's house. When Mrs. Lin saw the person leaving, she said to Sun Jiaju in embarrassment, Mrs. Su was made to laugh. After saying that, a hint of worry rose in her brows. Sun Jiaro saw her appearance and couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong with Mrs. Lin?" Looking at her mother's honest answer, Suleun felt a little complicated for a moment. Sun Jiaro married into the Su family, and Mrs. Su was always in charge of the family. Although Su Changqing had raised a concubine, in the eyes of outsiders, he was not a good husband without a concubine, and the Su family's backyard also seemed particularly quiet. This also makes Sun Jiaro's temperament somewhat frank. The elder brother also inherited his mother's character. "I'm not afraid of Mrs. Su's jokes." Mrs. Lin Su did not expect that Sun Jiaro would ask so straightforwardly, but she still reacted and continued, "Mrs. Su also knows that the Queen Mother's birthday is after the Spring Festival. As early as years ago, I took my embroidery ladies to sew a picture of hundreds of birds facing the phoenix. I have heard a little bit about this matter." Sun Jiaro nodded in response, but felt a little nervous in her heart. Mrs. Lin continued, "It's just a coincidence that the envoy from Gaoyu Kingdom came to visit at that time. The Queen Mother ordered us to make another embroidery before her birthday, but you also know that the two pictures were done at the same time, which consumes a lot of manpower and material resources." Listening to Mrs. Lin's explanation, Sun Jiaro's expression became more and more dull. Suleun looked well behaved, as if he didn't understand what Mrs. Lin said. "You can think about it in your heart. Jaya Kingdom is a small country close to the Dacian dynasty. It surrendered to the Dacian dynasty in the early years, and now it is becoming more and more prosperous under the protection of the Dacian dynasty. In her previous life, she had never attended the Queen's birthday, nor had she met the envoys from Gaoyu Kingdom. The only thing she knew was that Gaoyu Kingdom sent a princess, who was eventually given a marriage by the emperor to the 8th prince. Mrs. Su, I know it's a little abrupt to say this, but..." Mrs. Lin glanced at Suleun, and then slowly said under Sun Jiaro's gaze, "In order to complete it before the Queen Mother's birthday, I hope Mrs. Su can agree to let Su miss, let's help together." Sun Jiaro fell silent. It was not a good thing to be involved with the royal family. Although she had previously thought that it was a good thing for Jing Yunar to marry the Prince of Jin, the premise was that Yunar was the legitimate daughter of the home mansion and was naturally worthy of being a prince. But now that she has learned about Su Changqing's dirty deeds, sooner or later she will tell her son the daughter left the home mansion. At that time, it will definitely not be a good thing to have anything to do with the royal family. What's more, this matter is related to etiquette. If Yunar goes wrong. Mrs. Su, I understand your worries, but I can assure you that no matter what happens, I will bear it myself. Mrs. Lin, to be honest, my Yunar has only been back in the capital for more than a month, and she only started learning embroidery nearly half a month ago. I'm worried that she won't be qualified." Sun Jiaro thought about the explanation, but Mrs. Lin smiled. Mrs. Su was joking. Miss Su's craftsmanship is beyond the reach of those embroiderers who have studied for several years. How could it be possible that she only studied for a few days? Mrs. Lin thought Sun Jiaro's words were excuses, but when she saw Sun Jiaro's expression, her voice softened. She looked at Sun Jiaro and then at Suleun. A trace of suspicion arose in my heart. Mrs. Lin took a sip of tea, suppressed her surprise, pursed her lips and said, "Did Mrs. Su tell the truth just now? When I learned about this, I had the same thoughts as Mrs. Lin." These words obviously confirmed Mrs. Lin's idea. Mrs. Lin frowned slightly and became suspicious. If Suleun had studied embroidery for several years and could sew such smart double-sided embroidery, she would believe it. but if it was said that he had only learned for half a month, he could have such a skill. She really couldn't believe it. Could it be that Mrs. deliberately found someone to sew the double-sided embroidery in order to build momentum for Suleun? Thinking about it, the expression on Mrs. Lin's face became a little colder. The tone was also a little colder, but I think the double-sided embroidery is really good. If you don't have a few years of sewing skills, I'm afraid I won't be able to sew it. If Mrs. didn't lie to me, could it be that Miss Su lied to me? Mrs. Lin, how could you? Sun Gro could not understand what Mrs. Lin meant, and she immediately became angry. It was nothing for her to be misunderstood, but how could she allow her child to be misunderstood? Mother, Suleun called to Sun Gro and smiled at Mrs. Lin, could you please ask Mrs. Lin to bring some needles and thread? Nature. Mrs. Lin nodded and ordered the maid. Soon, the needle and thread were brought. In front of Mrs. Lin, Suleun threaded the needle and thread in one go, and soon the outline was outlined on the embroidered cloth. The more Mrs. Lin looked at it, the brighter her eyes became. She has been doing embroidery for many years, so she can't tell that Suleun's technique is extremely skillful, and each stitch is neat and smooth. With such craftsmanship, the double-sided embroidery must have been sewn by Suleun himself. Thinking of what Sun Gro said, Mrs. Lin couldn't help but sigh. If she were raised in the capital, the second young lady of the Su family would probably be even more outstanding than the eldest lady Su. Suleun put down the needle and thread and raised the embroidery cloth. Mrs. Lin, please take a look. The embroidery cloth was shaken off, and it turned out to be a double-sided embroidery. There is only a crescent moon on it. The pattern is not difficult, but it can be sewn into a double-sided embroidery in such a short time. Mrs. Lin's doubts about Suleun have also disappeared. I am actually blind. Mrs. Lin nodded slightly towards Sun Gro and Suleun. Mrs. Su, Miss Su, please forgive me for what I just said. Mrs. Lin is serious. You are not wrong to have such a suspicion. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I might not believe such a thing. Suleun smiled. Mrs. Lin looked at Suleun, becoming more and more satisfied and feeling pity. Why did the Su family leave such a good boy in Jingzhou? She sighed helplessly and shook her head, feeling worthless for Suleun. But Mrs. Lin also saw the look on Sun Gro's face just now. How could such a mother who loves her children be willing to abandon her child? She had also heard about the Su family's dove occupying the magpie's nest. Now that she thought about it, it might be true. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 93. Chapter 93. I agreed. Mrs. Lin naturally took the step that Suleun handed over. Similarly, Suleun also agreed to Mrs. Lin's request and helped her sew embroidery together. Out of the Lin mansion, on the carriage, Sun Gro's expression was somewhat solemn. Mom, if you have any questions, just ask Yunur. Suleun held Sun Gro's hand and leaned on her shoulder. Sun Gro sighed and stroked Suleun's hair. Why did you agree to Mrs. Lin? She was not angry at Suleun, but at herself, the mother-in-law. It is normal for her children to have their own thoughts when they are older, but since the affair of the outer room was revealed, she looked at everyone in the Su mansion and realized how closed-minded she had been in the past. She used to feel grateful for Mrs. Su, thinking that Mrs. Su wanted her to live more leisurely. Now that I think about it, it was just that Mrs. Su didn't trust her and was unwilling to hand over the power of the head of the family. Mom, my daughter doesn't want to hide it from you. The double-sided embroidery is the brick I used to knock on the door of Lin Mansion. Suleun straightened up and met Sun Gro's eyes. Although the two uncles are still fighting bravely on the battlefield, killing the enemy is a great achievement. In recent years, His Majesty rarely promoted the two uncles, but only sent many rewards. Instead, it was the Su family. Although Su Haoi inherited the position of Marquis, he was actually a civil servant. There is no military power here, so your Majesty has promoted Mr. Su several times, isn't it just to suppress our Sun family? Sun Gro looked at Suleun. How could she have imagined that such words came from her daughter's mouth? She had obviously only come back not long ago, but she saw the situation of the Sun family so clearly. Yunur, if my mother hadn't lost you back then, you wouldn't be like this now. Mom, that incident was never your fault. Suleun held Sun Gro's hand and smiled softly. Now that our mother and daughter are reunited, it is the best arrangement for Yunur. Suleun is extremely grateful to be able to live another life and return to her mother. How can there be greed? Mother knows that you are successful, so she won't say anything more about this matter, and don't force yourself too much. Sun Gro blinked away the tears in her eyes. Suleun smiled and said, I listen to my mother. In the palace. Imperial study room. Your Majesty, please calm down. I believe that these homeless people from the northwest must be eliminated as soon as possible. Your Majesty, I think we can try to negotiate peace first, maybe. General Li, just because you don't dare to fight doesn't mean that others don't. The man in front couldn't help scolding him. General Li also changed his expression. I heard what the general said. Are you willing to send troops to fight the homeless people in the northwest? I didn't say that. General Yu coughed lightly and turned away. Looking at the generals who were making excuses below, the emperor's expression became even worse. Okay. I called you here to discuss a solution? I didn't just watch you bicker. Several generals closed their mouths and looked at each other, not daring to raise their eyes to look at the furious emperor. These homeless people from the northwest have been harassing our border. I don't think they have any intention of negotiating peace. What do you think? The emperor's face turned cold. Your Majesty, I think maybe our sincerity is not enough. Sincerity? The emperor looked at General Yu coldly. General Yu, do you think that ceding the territory of Dashan is enough sincerity? I don't dare. What does General Li mean? The emperor ignored General Yu, who was kneeling on the ground, and looked directly at General Li. The latter was stared at by the emperor, and soon cold sweat broke out on his forehead. I think, the homeless people in the northwest are so arrogant and should be taught a lesson. I think so too. General Li thinks the same as me. How about I send General Li to deal with the homeless people in the northwest? Back to the emperor, I am worried that I am not capable enough. General Li's legs were shaking a little. He talked about fighting, but if he really went to the battlefield, he might not be able to stay for a while. Looking at these people, the emperor's expression became calmer and calmer, but underneath the calmness there was a hint of wind and waves. His Royal Highness the King of Jin has arrived. The door to the imperial study room was pushed open, and Xiao Shenjiao met the eyes of several generals and entered slowly. I pay my respects to the Holy One. Get up. Seeing Xiao Shenjiao, the emperor's expression softened a little, but his tone was still hard. Several generals also saluted Xiao Shenjiao, but they were muttering in their hearts, why is His Royal Highness the King of Jin here now? What do you think of the homeless people in the northwest? The emperor raised his head and asked. Xiao Shenjiao narrowed his eyes, and after a moment, he said, back to the emperor, the northwest border is our fortress. The homeless people in the northwest harassed us several times, but they really did not take our country seriously. I believe that such arrogance should be severely punished. That's it? Well said, he is indeed my son. The emperor smiled a little more, but he was very satisfied with Xiao Shenjiao's answer. Then what do you think we should do? Kill. Xiao Shenjiao spoke calmly, and the word kill made several people present feel cold. General Yu and General Li looked at each other and saw a chill in their eyes. His Royal Highness the King of Jin has never been on the battlefield, but in his early years I heard that he brutally killed the wet nurse who raised him. Such courage is really shocking. No wonder he could say such a thing. Then who do you think I should send? I am willing to go. At this time, even the emperor was stunned. Are you really going? The emperor stared into Xiao Shenjiao's eyes, which were very much like the late queen's, and his heart trembled slightly. Xiao Shenjiao didn't care about the emperor's reaction. Since his biological mother passed away, his relationship with the emperor had become cold. As a prince, I naturally have to take the lead. Of course he didn't just agree to go to the northwest, he also had his own plans. The emperor frowned and said, I'll think about this again. You all should go down first. You stay. The generals lowered their heads and walked out of the imperial study. The emperor and Xiao Shenjiao were left alone. Why do you want to go to the northwest? The emperor wants to deal with the homeless people in the northwest, I just want to relieve the emperor's worries. Xiao Shenjiao returned coldly. Even if only the father and son are left now, Xiao Shenjiao still calls himself his minister. The emperor's eyebrows showed a bit of confusion. This matter. Your Majesty, if you are not willing to let me go, I will not go. After saying that, Xiao Shenjiao turned to leave when he heard an angry voice coming from behind, Stop. Xiao Shenjiao stopped and asked, Is the emperor going to change his mind? Do you really want to be so alienated from me all the time? Your Majesty, you are worrying too much. Since you want to go, I agree. The emperor sighed and fell into his chair. Thank you, Your Majesty. Xiao Shenjiao turned around and bowed his hands, then left the imperial study. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 94. Chapter 94 Bookstore. Kaya Huaziazu. A young boy ran in from outside the courtyard, his steps hurried. Sister Lian Xian, a bookkeeper, came outside the house and said he was delivering account books to the second young lady. The boy took out an account book from his arms and handed it to Lian Xian. Lian Xian reached out and took it, lowering her voice and saying, I understand, I will give it to the second lady. After saying that, she took out a little bit of silver from her sleeve and put it into the boy's hand. I'd rather trouble you to run over. There's no need to tell anyone else about this. Sister Xieliangzin, I know. As soon as the boy touched the broken silver in his hand, his eyes narrowed with laughter. After the boy left, Lian Xian looked at the account book in her hand, feeling a little confused. Why are you sending this account book to the lady? After taking a short nap, Sulayun slowly opened his eyes and stood up from the couch. Kualayu hurriedly stepped forward to serve and said, Miss, Lian Xian said before that someone sent this account book. Account books. Sulayun changed his clothes under Kuiliu's service and combed his messy hair. Just then he left the dormitory and walked to the study on the side. The study room is still a bit messy. Previously, there was only a desk, but Sulayun has been sorting it out in the past few days. Purchased something. The account book was placed on the table. Sulayun looked through it and saw that it looked like a certain bookstore. It recorded the records of many books entering and exiting the warehouse. Sulayun thought of something and took out a land deed from the small cabinet on the side. Miss, isn't this the shop that my uncle gave you? Kualayu suddenly realized, could this account book belong to this shop? It should be. Sulayun nodded and handed the account book and land deed to Kualayu. Just like the shops my mother gave me before, let's give them to Grandma Zhang for safekeeping. Yes, miss. Kualayu reached out and took it, only to see a letter dropped in the account book. Miss, there is a letter inside. Sulayun was a little confused when he saw the envelope in Kualayu's hand. When I opened it, I saw it was a resignation letter. The person who wrote the letter is Mr. Accountant. The letter only said that he was going back to his hometown to retire, so he wanted to resign from his post as accountant, but there was something a little weird about what he said. Sulayun put the letter away and said, "Quilayu, come with me out of the house. I will go and arrange the carriage immediately." Quilayu walked out and was stopped by Sulayun again. "No need for a carriage, we can just walk there. The streets are very lively with people coming and going." Because of the Chinese New Year, lanterns were hung at the door of many shops. The bookstore is located on Chang'an Street. When Sulayun and Quilayu approached, a middle-aged man pushed a scholar out. "Why are you coming to a bookshop if you don't have money? Why don't you leave quickly?" The scholar was pushed to the ground, and his already shabby clothes were stained in several places. He was not annoyed at all, he just stood up, patted the dust on his body, and said with his hands, "Xiaosheng went to Beijing to take the exam. I only have so much money left on hand, but that book is really important to Xiaosheng. I hope the shopkeeper can you please be accommodating and allow me to write it down. Let's go and ask around, there is no bookstore in the whole capital that will let you copy without paying me." The middle-aged man waved his hands with an impatient look on his face. The scholar looked embarrassed, but did not beg again. He put the box on his back and said, "It's the young man who disturbed me. I hope the shopkeeper can forgive me." Then, the scholar turned and left. Sulayun frowned slightly. "Shopkeeper, I paid for the books that the young master wanted to buy." When the scholar heard this, he stopped and looked over in surprise. "Miss, are you serious?" The middle-aged man was equally puzzled. Sulayun winked at Quilayu, who took out a few taels of silver from his purse. Quilayu handed the silver coins to the middle-aged man. "Is this money enough?" "Enough is enough." The middle-aged man quickly reached out and took it, went into the library and took out the book the scholar wanted, and even delivered it to the scholar himself. "Miss, this is your money." Sulayun nodded, and Quilayu took the change back from the middle-aged man's hand. Seeing this, the middle-aged man turned around and entered the bookstore. "I don't know what to call this young lady, Xiaosheng Suchu, can you please leave your address? I will definitely give you some money after my birthday." The scholar stepped forward and handed Sulayun his hand. Sulayun felt that the name was vaguely familiar, but he couldn't remember it for the moment. "It's just a book, nothing important." "Miss, what you said is wrong. It is just a book to you, but it is extremely important to Xiaosheng." Su Chu's voice was loud and clear, and he had the character of a scholar. Sulayun had never been in contact with such a literate person in his previous life. Even Li Rui, who was born in a scholarly family, had an official style in his behavior and could not see the bearing of a scholar at all. Looking at Su Chu now, she found it very interesting. "Mr. Su is right, I'm telling you the truth. If you want to pay back the money one day, just come to this bookstore and see me." After saying that, Sulayun smiled and took Quilayu into the bookstore. Su Chu was left alone at a loss. He looked at the book in his hand and then at the bookstore in front of him. "It seems that I have thought of it, but I don't seem to understand it." Had to leave with confusion. The middle-aged man was leaning in front of the counter. When he saw someone coming in, he did not raise his head and said casually, "Our store is a small business. If there are books you want to buy, please pay early. Is Mr. Accountant here?" Sulayun stood in front of the counter and asked. But his eyes were looking around. The interior of the bookstore was in a mess. Many books looked tattered, but the account book clearly showed that new books had been put into the library in the past 2 months. Hearing the sound, the middle-aged man raised his eyes and met Sulayun's cold gaze, and a chill suddenly ran down his spine. "Aren't you the lady just now? What are you doing with the accountant? If you don't want to buy books, please leave quickly." "Green Willow!" Sulayun shouted. Quilayu came forward with the land deed and said, "This shop is now in Our Lady's name. As the owner, Our Lady wants to see the accountant. Is there no problem? You, or you Miss Sui are who just came back?" The middle-aged man looked at Sulayun in surprise. Didn't he say he came back from the countryside? Why does this posture look no different from that of a young lady raised in the capital? It's just that I was blind and didn't recognize Miss Su'er. Is Mr. Cashier in the shop? Sulayun ignored the middle-aged man's flattery and just asked again. The middle-aged man smiled awkwardly. Yes, it's on the second floor. I'll take you up. Going up the stairs, the decoration on the second floor is completely different from the one downstairs. The window is bright and clean, and there is a light fragrance. The corridor is also decorated with many expensive vases. Sulayun saw it and remained silent. Xiaolin, Miss Su'er is here. The middle-aged man knocked on the door, his tone a bit urging. There was a sudden noise in the house, as if someone knocked something over in a panic. Here, it's a bit messy in there, maybe it needs to be tidied up. Second lady, please sit down for a moment. The middle-aged man smiled awkwardly at Sulayun, pointed to the seat by the windowsill, and motioned to Sulayun. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 95. Chapter 95 Mr. Accountant. What kind of mess can accounting room be? I'm not here to find fault, Quilayu, open the door. Sulayun said with a smile, there was no warmth in his eyes. Before the middle-aged man could stop him, Quilayu stepped forward and reached out to push the door open. At this time, the door opened. A young man with a sly look stood behind the door. Uncle, shopkeeper, I was just writing down the purchase order and wasted time. Well, let me introduce to you, this is Miss Sulayun and Su'er, who will be the new owner of our bookstore from now on. The middle-aged man glared at Lin Er without any trace. Lin Er straightened up, rubbed his hands, gave Sulayun a flattering smile, and said, Hello, Miss Second, my name is Lin Er, and I am the accountant of the bookstore. I seem to have seen you at the door of Su Mansion. There seemed to be a group of people making trouble outside the door. Sulayun suddenly asked. Lin Er waved his hands quickly and explained anxiously, Second miss, you must have read it wrong. I have never been to the Su Mansion, let alone making trouble in front of the Ho Mansion. Really, Sulayun suddenly realized, maybe I saw it wrong. Quilayu wanted to say something, but when she met Sulayun's eyes, she silently closed her mouth. Sulayun looked into the accounting room and said, Shopkeeper, I came here today to take a look at the account books from previous years. Isn't it convenient? This. The middle-aged man glanced at Lin Er, who suddenly turned pale. Of course, but the bookstore has been open for more than 20 years, does the second lady want to read it? That's not necessary, just the last 3 years will be fine. Then please wait a moment, Miss Second, while Lin Er and I go get it. The ones from previous years are locked in the room on the other side. Sulayun nodded. The middle-aged man and Lin Er entered the accounting room, walked to a door, unlocked it, and pushed the door open. After the two figures disappeared, Kuilu frowned and approached Sulayun, whispering, Miss, there is something wrong with these two people. It was obviously that Mr. Accountant sent the account books. How could this Lin Er never come to Su Mansion? Don't worry, the fox will always show its tail. Quilayu understood what he said. It turned out that the young lady had noticed it a long time ago. No wonder she asked Lin Er that question. Inside the door, Lin Er leaned next to the middle-aged man. Uncle, what should we do? Why are you panicking? Didn't I ask you to prepare those account books before? But Lin Er's heartbeat was still racing rapidly, and he always felt that something was wrong. Lin Wenbin patted him on the head and said, It's nothing, I've been teaching you for more than a year, but you're still in a panic and you haven't made any progress. Just do what you did just now. This second lady just came back from the countryside. I'm afraid she can't see it either. I understand these account books, just to show off. New. Lin Er returned with his neck hunched. After a while, Lin Wenbin and Lin Er walked out with their account books. Looking at the similarity between the two people's eyebrows, and thinking of the word uncle that Lin Er blurted out before, Sulayun had a guess in his mind. Second miss, these are the account books you want. The middle-aged man put the account book on the table and said. Sulayun nodded and asked, did Lin Er make these account books? No, it's not. Lin Er quickly returned, his voice a bit sharp. Lin Er arrived a year ago and has been working for just over a year. He was not responsible for the previous accounting books. Lin Wenbin glanced at Lin Er and explained to him. Sulayun picked up a book casually, flipped through it, and said, do you mind if I take a moment to read it? Of course not, Miss Second, you can look at it as you like. As he said that, Sulayun sat down. Lin Wenbin and Lin Er looked at each other. The former said, second miss, I will go down first. If you have anything to do, you can ask Lin Er the same thing. Lin Er and Kualayu both stayed in the accounting room. As time gradually passed, Sulayun closed the account book and turned to face Lin Er's nervous eyes. I can't eat people, so you don't have to be so nervous. Lin Er forced a smile and said, is there anything you don't understand, Miss Er? I see that the bookstore has produced quite a few books in the past 3 years. Why is there not much income when the accounts are calculated at the end of the year? Second miss, the books in our bookstore are all made of the best paper and pen. It seems that we sell more, but in fact, we spend more. Moreover, the bookstore also needs to be renovated, and we decorate it. The money is also paid through debt collection. Speaking of these, Lin Er couldn't stop himself. He spoke very fluently without any stuttering. It seems like it was memorized earlier. Sulayun took out an account book and said, the shopkeeper said you came here last year, so you should be the one who made this account book. Yes, it's made by a small person. Lin Er hurriedly arrived. Sulayun held up the account book and shook it. Sorry, I took the wrong account book. This one seems to be the one. Ah! Lin Er was stunned. He never thought that Sulayun would have such a skill. As an accountant, don't you even know which account book you made yourself? Small. Lin Er couldn't say anything to explain. He hesitated and his legs began to tremble. The previous owner had always been indifferent. Although the new owner came back from the countryside, he was so powerful. He was a little unsteady on his feet. Or are you not doing the accounting for the past year? Then I have to ask, since you haven't done the accounting, why are you getting paid? You have to know that if this kind of thing is reported to the government, but going to jail. Second miss, I know that these account books are really made by a small person. I don't dare to lie to you. Lin Er's legs completely softened and he knelt on the ground. By the way, I forgot to mention it before. You said you had never been to Su Mansion. But unfortunately, before noon, a bookkeeper sent an account book to Su Mansion. It was the bookstore's account book. You said you had not been there. Su Mansion, who sent that account book? What? Lin Er was completely dumbfounded now. Someone sent the account book to Su Mansion? Keep your voice down. Sulayun was so cold that Kualayu also closed the door very considerately. This serious atmosphere made Lin Er feel uneasy. Who could have sent the account books to the Su Mansion? Could it be? Since you can't answer it, why don't I change the question? What's your relationship with the shopkeeper? Sulayun lowered his eyes and looked at Lin Er. This question made Lin Er flinch. He met Sulayun's cold gaze and did not dare to hide it. The shopkeeper's brother is the little one's father. With such a timid appearance, Sulayun was really curious. How dare he help Lin Wenbin make false accounts? What benefit did he give you? Second miss, what do you mean? I don't understand. Lin Er glanced at Sulayun in horror. then quickly lowered his head. What does the second lady mean by this? Is it possible that she discovered that they had made false accounts? Impossible, this is impossible. Lin Er retorted in his heart and forced himself to calm down. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 96. Chapter 96 Distant Cousin. Sulayun doesn't have that much patience. If she hadn't received the account book today, she might have been concealed by Lin Wenbin. Quilayu, go and report to the official. Yes. Although Quilayu was confused, she quickly agreed and turned around to go out. Lin Er's heart shrank. Second miss, what do you want to do? Since you don't want to speak, how about letting the government handle it? You know, embezzling your employer's property is enough to keep you in jail for the rest of your life. Sulayun raised his eyes to look at Lin Er, with no warmth in his eyes. When Sulayun looked at him like this, the barrier Lin Er had just established was broken again. Jail. He doesn't want to go to jail. If you cooperate with me honestly, I will naturally give you a lighter punishment. I think although Lin Wenbin asked you to make false accounts, he didn't pay you much, right? Sulayun took a look at Lin Er. Although he was well dressed, there were patches on his shoes, and the jade pendant around his waist was very cheap. Most of the money was probably swallowed up by Lin Wenbin. Lin Er was stunned. He thought about the money he had received in the past. He had also questioned it, but Lin Wenbin said that he could not take out more money so quickly and could only give it to him little by little. Small. His expression became more and more hesitant. Quilayu also stopped at the door early and did not push the door open. Just a little bit behind, Sulayun thought for a moment and said, Lin Er, if you don't tell me, I can check it myself. The reason why I ask you is to give you a chance, and I hope you don't miss it. After saying that, Sulayun stood up and walked towards the door. Her steps were not fast, she was waiting for Lin Er's answer. As he walked to the door, Quilayu was about to open the door and go out when there was a sound behind him. Second miss, I said. Sulayun slowly turned around and met Lin Er's eyes. The latter took a deep breath and said, Second miss, what you just said still count. Nature. Downstairs, Lin Wenbin's expression in front of the counter became more and more solemn. He looked at the stairs with some uneasiness. The next moment, he stood up straight and took out a bunch of keys from under the counter. Lin Wenbin walked to the back door with the key. There was a dry well outside the door. He went down the well along the rope, and soon climbed up with a wooden box in his hand. Holding the wooden box in his arms, Lin Wenbin hurried out of the bookstore. Su Mansion. Huiro Pavilion. Madam, my aunt is here. Mother Li entered the room with a strange expression and whispered in Sun Jiao's ear. You must know that for so many years since Madam has been married to the Su family, the number of times this lady has come to Huiro Pavilion can only be counted on your fingers, no more than 5 fingers. And every time she comes, a lot of troubles will happen. Ask her to come in. Sun Jiao nodded, with a calm expression. Su Changjing was quickly welcomed in. When she saw the simple decoration in Sun Jiao's house, a hint of sarcasm flashed across her eyes. Sister-in-law, I came today so I didn't disturb you. With these words on his lips, Su Changjing sat down on her own without waiting for Sun Jiao's greeting, as if she was the owner here. What do you find me for? Sun Jiao motioned to the maid to serve tea to Su Changjing, her tone not fluctuating much. Su Changjing frowned slightly. She came to see Sun Jiao rarely, but when did Sun Jiao not entertain her in a friendly manner? Recalling the situation on the day she returned to Beijing, Su Changjing looked at Sun Jiao without any trace. Sister-in-law, I've been back home for a few days and haven't come to your yard to have a look. It happens to be empty, so I came to take a look. I heard that my brother hasn't come to your yard these days. Is something wrong with you? Why don't you tell me, maybe I can help my sister-in-law. The Marquis has a heavy official schedule and he came back very late after finishing his work. He was afraid of disturbing me, so he didn't come. Sun Gro chuckled, her face softened. What's more, we are an old married couple, why do we need to stay together all day long? Together? Seeing Sun Gro's expression, Su Changjing breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that this stupid woman hadn't discovered anything yet. Thinking about it, the smile on Su Changjing's lips became more obvious. Actually, I do have something to discuss with my sister-in-law today. Su Changjing glanced at Sun Gro and continued, Lu Hong's distant cousin came to the capital not long ago and wanted to join Lu Hong. Sister-in-law, you also know that Lu Hong was promoted. The Holy Father has not issued an edict on the matter, and we have no way to purchase a house, so Lu Hong and I thought of letting them live in the house temporarily. Sun Gro looked at Su Changjing with confusion on her face. How come I haven't heard of any distant relatives in the Lu family? I'm afraid someone is pretending to be one? Have you and your brother-in-law investigated this matter clearly? If the Lu family has any distant relatives, it is impossible for the Sun family not to know about them. Let alone coming out at this moment. Sun Gro didn't believe Su Changjing's words at all. She said it while thinking about what Su Changjing was going to do. Sister-in-law, you are worrying too much. Su Changjing's expression stiffened for a moment, but Sun Gro did not miss it. It is true that he is a distant relative of Lu Hong, but we rarely contacted each other before, and we only contacted him after we went to Suzhou. After saying that, Su Changjing sighed, Sister-in-law, I also told my brother about this, but brother, I said I must get your consent. If you really don't want to, then I can only refuse. Is this what the Marquis said? Sun Gro seemed to be moved and asked hesitantly. Su Changjing saw the drama and said quickly, really, sister-in-law, my brother also said that if you don't agree, sister-in-law, he will definitely listen to you. Sun Gro smiled, since the Marquis has said so, I can't refuse anymore. After all, he is a relative of Lu Hong, and naturally a relative of our Su family. Sister-in-law, I wish you could think so. The ridicule in Su Changjing's eyes became more and more obvious. She already wanted to see Sun Gro's regret later. So what if she is Sun Xiao's daughter? She has no brains and is not under the control of the Su family. Brother really chose a good wife back then. When Su Changjing left, Grandma Li was a little worried. Madam, that distant cousin, I'm afraid it's not that simple, right? The soldiers came to cover up the water and the earth. If Su Changqing and Su Changjing still think that I am the same as before, then they are wrong. Sun Gro suppressed the coldness in her eyes and took a sip of the cold tea. The coolness entered her throat and dissipated the heat in her chest. Su Changjing came to Huiro Pavilion just to get her to agree to let Lu Hong's distant cousin stay. But the look in Su Changjing's eyes told her that things were definitely not that simple. Is this distant cousin a relative of Lu Hong, or who is it? Sun Gro did not think any further, even though the answer was right in front of her eyes. Madam. Mother Li called out several times before Sun Gro came back to her senses. Facing Grandma Li's worried eyes, Sun Gro waved her hands and said, Grandma, don't worry about me, I'm just a little tired. Then let me help my wife to rest. Sun Gro nodded. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 97. Chapter 97 etc. Chang'an Street, second floor of Shuzi. Second miss, I've told you everything I know. Lin Er swallowed and did not dare to look at Suleun's angry face. From Lin Er's mouth, Suleun learned a lot of things. The previous accountant was kicked out by Lin Wenbin. Kualayu, go and bring Lin Wenbin up. Kualayu responded, quickly went downstairs, and ran up again after a while. Miss, the person is missing. How can it be? Lin couldn't believe what he heard. He pushed Kualayu away and rushed downstairs. Sulayun followed and went down to the first floor. There was indeed not a single figure in front of the cabinet. Miss, has shopkeeper Lin run away? Uncertain. Sulayun looked around, his eyes falling on the open back door. She took a few steps forward and looked out the back door, where she could see a well. Just as he was about to take a few more glances, Lin Wenbin's voice sounded from the door. Second miss. Uncle. Lin rushed forward first and grabbed Lin Wenbin's sleeve, as if he was worried that he would run away. As soon as Lin Wenbin saw his reaction, he knew something was wrong, but his expression remained calm. Second miss, have you taken good care of the account books? Watch it. I wonder where shopkeeper Lin ran away just now. Sulayun withdrew his gaze from the back door and fell on Lin Wenbin. Lin Wenbin waved the medicine bag in his hand and said with a smile, I just remembered to get some medicine. It's at Baikatang next to it, not far away. His breathing was steady, but the continuous rolling of his Adam's apple showed that he was lying. Sulayun took this discovery into consideration. Baikatang was indeed not far away, and there was no need for him to rush for it. Unless he went to another place, a place far away from the library. Shopkeeper Lin is not in good health. Just a little problem. Lin Wenbin waved his hands, not paying much attention. Sulayun then smiled and said, in that case, shopkeeper Lin, you don't mind if I ask you about the account books, right? Second miss, what do you want to ask? Lin Wenbin paused slightly with his hands, but quickly and calmly put the medicine bag on the cabinet. Lin has told me everything that needs to be said. Sulayun did not ask directly, but said something with a half smile. Lin Wenbin's face darkened, showing a bit of annoyance. Second miss, I didn't hide it from you on purpose. Some of the things Lin said are not what you think. He glanced at Lin who met his gloomy eyes and couldn't help but take a few steps back and then lowered his head. Lin Wenbin sighed, second miss, in fact, the bookstore has been losing money over the years. I didn't want General Sun to worry, so I tampered with the account books. Luya noticed my actions and thought I had embezzled the money. But in fact, it was me who kept investing money in the bookstore to keep the bookstore running. The Luya he was talking about was the accountant who was dismissed earlier. He was also the one who sent the account books and resignation letter to Sulayun. Shopkeeper Lin has a deep affection for the bookstore and even uses his own money to subsidize the bookstore. Sulayun stared at Lin Wenbin, but there was no flaw in his expression. Moreover, what he said is indeed quite consistent with what Lin said. Let the second lady see the joke. Lin Wenbin shrugged and smiled, I have been in the bookstore for so many years, and I don't want to see it disappear. I will solve the money problem. I just hope that shopkeeper Lin will not do these things again in the future. Sulayun spoke calmly, as if he believed Lin Wenbin's words. Seeing this, Lin Wenbin's eyes flashed with a smile, young lady, I am relieved. How much money do you need? You and Lin make a list and send it to Su Mansion, and I will have someone make arrangements. Sulayun said that and left without staying much longer with Kualayu. Not far from the bookshop, Kualayu said with a puzzled face, Miss, do you think what shopkeeper Lin said is true? Lin Wenbin is not trustworthy, but I think if someone from the government searched for it, they would not be able to find anything. Sulayun looked not far away with a low voice. Now, let's wait for him to reveal himself. The signboard of Baikatang came into view. Sulayun thought of his grandfather's illness and said, let's go to Baikatang and have a look. Kualayu followed Sulayun step by step. As soon as the master and servant reached the entrance of Baiko Hall, they heard the sound of horse hooves coming from behind. Turning around, he saw an out-of-control horse running rampant on the road. Seeing the horses knocking over several stalls one after another, Sulayun frowned, his fingertips moved slightly, and a silver light flashed. The next moment, the silver needle flew out and stabbed the horse. The horse lost its strength, stopped suddenly, and fell sideways. Dusty. A figure rolled to the ground, stood up again, and waved his hand to disperse the dust around him. Sulayun was stunned for a moment. The person who fell from the horse was Princess Yongping. "Princess, are you okay?" Several people came up from behind and quickly surrounded Princess Yongping, asking for her welfare. Princess Yongping was impatient. "Everyone, get out of here. Princess, this horse is dead." A guard checked the horse's pulse and asked Princess Yongping. "Dead?" Upon hearing this, Princess Yongping's eyes widened. "This is a BMW I just bought, how could it die so easily? Didn't I tell you not to do anything?" "Princess, please forgive me, it was not my subordinates who did this. When my subordinates came after me, I saw the horse fall to the ground." Princess Yongping couldn't hear it. She only knew that the BMW she had just bought died like this. "Let me find out who did such a heavy hand to my horse." The angry Princess Yongping turned her head and met Sulayun's eyes. She frowned and stepped forward. "Why are you here?" "This is an interesting question from the princess. Can't the daughter of the people be here?" Facing Princess Yongping, Sulayun didn't have much of a good face. The whip last time and the wanton riding this time made her not feel that the Princess Yongping in front of her was worthy of her good treatment. Upon hearing this, Princess Yongping couldn't bear it. She reached out to touch her waist, but found nothing. Princess, is it possible that you are going to commit murder on the street?" Sulayun threw the whip in his hand to the ground. Princess Yongping was startled. The whip was clearly hanging on her waist. "When did Sulayun take it?" "You." "Princess, the daughter of the people still has some things to do, so I'll excuse you now." Sulayun bowed sideways and led Kualayu into the Baiko hall. Behind him, Princess Yongping didn't know what she was thinking of, but she even moved her steps and followed him. "Miss, how can I help you?" The medicine boy came up to him and greeted him warmly. Sulayun smiled gently and replied, "I want to buy some medicinal materials." "This way, please." The medicine boy led Sulayun to a counter. In front of the medicine cabinet, an old man with a grey beard sat. He was holding a medical book and was reading intently. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 98. Chapter 98 Fen Yecheng. "Mr. Zhang, this lady wants to buy medicinal materials." The medicine boy shouted softly, his expression extremely respectful. The old man holding the medical book raised his eyes and glanced at Sulayun, then lowered his head to read the book and asked, "What do you want to buy?" Sulayun handed over a piece of paper with the medicinal materials she needed written on it. Although the old man did not raise his head, he seemed to have seen Sulayun's movements. "Xiaozu, get this young lady some medicine." "Yes, Mr. Zhang." Xiaozu was the medicine boy. Hearing what Mr. Zhang said, he straightened his back, took the note from Sulayun, and started taking the medicine based on it. When he got the last medicinal ingredient, he stopped and looked a little confused. He placed the medicinal materials in front of the cabinet and said to Sulayun, "Miss, the fenjiaking you mentioned above does not exist here." Lao Zhang, who was still reading medical books, moved his hands, as if he was thinking about something. "Forget it if you don't have it, just wrap these for me." Sulayun was about to take the paper back when a hand stretched out from behind him and took the paper away first. Princess Yongping held the paper and said, "If Miss Su really needs this fenyeking, why not ask this princess? I am in a good mood, and maybe I can help you find it." Looking at Princess Yongping with a proud look on her face, the corner of Sulayun's mouth twitched slightly. Why hasn't Princess Yongping left yet? The princess's good intentions are appreciated by the people's daughters. He signaled Kuliu to take the medicinal materials, and Suleun was about to leave. Princess Yongping couldn't bear to be ignored again and again, so she grabbed Suleun. Did the princess let you go? It's simply unreasonable. Suleun turned around and looked at Princess Yongping, his eyes filled with frost. Princess Yongping was so frightened that she let go. When she reacted, she was furious again. Suleun, do you dare to look at me like this? As he spoke, Princess Yongping raised her hand and waved it towards Suleun's face. Before the slap fell, Suleun grabbed her wrist. Suleun moved very quickly and put Princess Yongping's hand behind her back. The surrounding guards suddenly became nervous and drew their swords to look at Suleun. Suleun, let me go. If you dare to do anything to me, the Queen Mother and the Emperor will not let you go. Even if Suleun caught her, Princess Yongping would still be noisy and domineering. Suleun leaned into Princess Yongping's ear and whispered, Princess, if you provoke me again, you won't be as relaxed as you are now. After saying that, she moved forward and pushed Princess Yongping towards the guards. The guards quickly sheathed their swords and stepped forward to catch Princess Yongping. Princess Yongping only felt a stabbing pain in her waist, which quickly disappeared. She looked at Suleun, who had a calm expression, and her heart tightened slightly. She always felt that what Suleun just said was true. She didn't dare to refute it for a moment. This Baiko hall is so lively. Gu Yuanbei's voice came from outside the door. Suleun turned his head to look and met Xiao Shenjiao's amber eyes. As soon as Princess Yongping saw Xiao Shenjiao, she immediately pushed away the guards around her, straightened her clothes and ran to Xiao Shenjiao's side. Brother Shenjiao. It turns out Princess Yongping, let me tell you, why is a medical clinic so noisy? Gu Yuanbei said and gave Suleun a winking look. Seeing his rich facial expressions, Suleun couldn't help but laugh. The scene of the two people looking at each other and smiling fell into Xiao Shenjiao's eyes, and the man's eyes darkened slightly. Gu Yuanbei, if you don't speak, no one will think you are mute. Princess Yongping couldn't tell that Gu Yuanbei was mocking her, so she immediately responded. Gu Yuanbei was not afraid of Princess Yongping, and said shamelessly, I'm just telling the truth. Why should Princess be angry? Okay, stop arguing. If I remember correctly, you should be in the house and think about your mistakes now. Xiao Shenjiao looked at Princess Yongping, his voice emotionless. Upon hearing this, Princess Yongping's face froze. Last time she almost caused a disturbance at Mrs. Li's birthday banquet, and was ordered by the Queen Mother to spend a month in seclusion. This time, she originally ran out secretly, but she didn't expect that the horse lost control on the way. If this matter reached the ears of the Queen Mother, she would probably have to spend another month in seclusion to think about it. I just went out for a walk. Princess Yongping's voice became lower and lower, then I'll go back now. I won't send the princess back yet. Xiao Shenjiao glanced at several guards, feeling coldly. The guards dared to hesitate and hurried forward to take Princess Yongping away. Princess Yongping was still reluctant to leave, and turned back to see Xiao Shenjiao. Brother Shenjiao, I sent you a post before, when can you come and see me? While the princess is sitting behind closed doors and thinking about her past, it's better not to be disturbed by anyone. Xiao Shenjiao's words were a rejection, and several guards were even more chilled. It was because they failed to perform their duties and actually let the princess run out of the house. If something happens to the princess while she is away, their heads will be at risk. Thinking of this, the guards became more and more frightened. Princess, let's go back quickly. After being pushed and pulled by others, Princess Yongping finally managed to get out of Baikatang. Fortunately, there were not many people in Baiko Hall, so not many people saw this farce. Suleun stepped forward to salute Xiao Shenjiao, when he saw the man in front of him waving his hand. Outside, Miss Su doesn't have to be so polite. Seeing this, Sulayun was happy to save the trouble and was about to leave with Kualayu. As a result, he was stopped again. Miss, please wait. Mr. Zhang put down the medical book in his hand and stepped forward. Facing the old man, Sulayun asked with a smile, I wonder what's wrong with this old gentleman. Can you let me see that piece of paper? Certainly. Kualayu handed over the paper she got back. Lao Zhang looked at the handwriting on it and felt vaguely familiar. There were only medicinal materials written on the paper, and it didn't look like a prescription. His eyes fell on the last name. The wind leaves are green. Who wrote the medicinal materials above? Lao Zhang asked. Although Sulayun felt a little strange, he still replied, I wrote the medicinal materials above. You wrote it? Lao Zhang looked at Sulayun and looked her up and down. The woman in front of him has a beautiful face, but she doesn't look like the old friend in his memory. She must not be his relative. But how did she learn about Fen Yecheng? Suddenly, Mr. Zhang remembered something, took out a prescription from the cabinet, and handed it to Sulayun. Did you write this prescription? The handwriting on the prescription is not Sulayun's, but the prescription looks familiar. Sulayun thought about it, wasn't this the prescription he wrote to Qinqiu? The handwriting on this is not mine, but this prescription is indeed mine. It's really you. Lao Zhang's eyes lit up. He had been thinking about finding the young lady who prescribed Qinqiu's medicine, but he didn't expect to meet her today. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 99. Chapter 99. Moving into the Su mansion. Sulayun still looked at a loss after being pulled by Mr. Zhang to sit down on the chair. Looking at the happy face of the other party, she said carefully, Old sir, do we know each other? How do you know about Fen Yecheng? Lao Zhang did not answer, but asked a question anxiously. Sulayun tensed up and thought to himself, could this Fen Yecheng be something that cannot be said? But when the master taught her, he clearly said that this was a medicinal herb. I read it from a medical book. She looked at Mr. Zhang's expression and answered calmly. Medical book. Lao Zhang didn't think much, sighed, and the look on his face became lonely. He thought it was that old friend. There are not many people who know Fen Yecheng, but there are very few people who use it for medicine. Mister, do you know where this Fen Yecheng can be found? Sulayun realized that Mr. Zhang's reaction was a bit strange. Although she was puzzled, what she was sure of was that this old gentleman should know Fen Yecheng. There is no drugstore in the whole capital that carries this medicinal material, but I can ask someone to look for it for you, girl. You should be able to find it. Thank you very much, old gentleman. Lao Zhang cheered up and looked at Sulayun. Miss, I have one more thing to say, from whom did you learn your medical skills? I learned it from a traveling doctor in Jingzhou. Sulayun has told this lie several times, and it is extremely natural to speak it again. Gu Yuanbei came close to Sulayun. I didn't expect Sister Yuner to have medical skills. There is no noble lady in the capital who has medical skills. Sister Yuner is the only one. As he spoke, he extended a thumbs up to express his praise. Sulayun felt helpless. Brother Gu, please stop teasing me. I've only scratched the surface, so I'm not really good at it. This lady is too modest. Mr. Zhang looked at Sulayun and nodded with satisfaction. Neither humble nor arrogant, and his medical skills are not bad, but he is a good seedling. Thinking of this, Mr. Zhang shook his head. What a pity, it happened to be a girl. Fen Yecheng has also been found, and Sulayun finally left Baikatang. Behind him were Gu Yuanbei and Xiao Shenjiao. Your Highness, Brother Gu, I will go back first. Suleun turned around to say goodbye to the two of them, and left with Quilau. Leave Guyuanbei and Xiao Shenjiao standing at the door of Baikatang. Sister Yunar is really different from the women in the capital. When the women next to you see you, they can't take their eyes away. Guyuanbei started teasing. He saw Xiao Shenjiao glance at him coldly. I went to Shuzhong and you became even more noisy. Leaving Guyuanbei behind, Xiao Shenjiao walked straight forward. Hey, why are you angry? Guyuanbei scratched his head with a confused look on his face. Didn't he often joke like this? Why did you offend this man this time? As we approached Su Mansion, two carriages drove towards us. Slowly stopped at the door of Su Mansion. We have guests again. Quilau muttered. Suleun frowned. She saw Su Changjing coming out of the house and walking to the carriage with a smile on her face. A pair of bare hands opened the curtain, and then a person got out of the carriage. Yao, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Su Changjing greeted Wen Yao warmly, and a man and a woman got out of the carriage behind them, and then the group walked inside. Little, miss. Quilau turned to look at Suleun, who was motionless, and saw that her young lady's eyes were filled with red bloodshot eyes. It is very terrible. I'm fine, Suleun said hoarsely, but the emotion in his eyes could not be suppressed. The woman who greeted Su Changjing was clearly Su Changqing's concubine, and the other two were the good sons and daughters that Su Changqing called her. How did they come to Su Mansion? Suleun took a deep breath, and then slowly let go of his hand until he felt the tingling pain in his palm. You put the medicinal materials back and I'll go to Huiro Pavilion. She wanted to talk to her mother about this matter. Hurry all the way to Huiro Pavilion. Mother. Suleun pushed the door open and came face to face with Sun Jiao's condensed face. He also saw Sun Wu on the side and realized that Sun Jiao might have already known about this matter. You came back from outside, Sun Jiao glanced at Suleun's dress. Did you see those three people? My daughter saw it. Suleun walked to Sun Jiao and sat down. Touching Suleun's somewhat cold hand, Sun Jiao sighed softly. Su Changjing came to the yard earlier and said that some distant relatives of Lu Hong were coming to stay at home temporarily. It turned out to be them. Mom, do you really want them to stay? Suleun asked. She was completely disgusted with those three people, but she was not afraid at all. Sun Jiao lowered her eyes and smiled. Su Changqing is unkind, so you don't have to blame me for being unjust. After all, the Su family has no room for them to speak. Mother is right. Su Changjing took the three of them to a small courtyard. Although it had been cleaned very clean, the house was very simple and there was nothing at all. The expressions of the three of them are not good. You, don't take it too hard. Today's preparations are sudden and haven't been arranged yet. Changjing, I don't dislike you, I'm just worried about the child in my belly. Wen Yao hid the dissatisfaction in her eyes, stretched out her hand and touched her stomach, which was not rising at all, looking kind-hearted. Su Changjing continued, don't worry, brother will definitely make arrangements. You go and wash up first, and then go to the main hall to have a meal later. Good. At the end of the Wenyi month, Su Changzhong and Su Yuqing saw that their mother didn't say much, so naturally they didn't speak either. He politely thanked Su Changjing and then went in with his things. Main hall. Suleun followed Sun Jiao to the main hall. Su Ye also just came back from outside and was slightly startled when he saw the posture in the main hall. Is this a guest? Brother Suleun waved and waited for Su Ye to come over, then whispered, no matter what happens at the dinner table, please stay silent. What happened? Su Ye was confused, but seeing Suleun's solemn expression and people coming and going serving dishes, he didn't ask any further questions. Soon, the old lady and Su Weiner also arrived at the main hall. The old lady's expression was not very good looking, and even Su Weiner's expression was a little strange. Mother, Yao, and the others are here. Su Changjing's voice came from the side, and soon, the group entered the main hall. Wen Yao followed Su Changzhong and Su Yuking on the left and right, dressed neatly, simple but not shabby. Seeing the three of them, Su Leun glanced at Sun Jiaro worriedly. But Sun Jiaro was far calmer than she thought. Her eyes looked at the three people without any fluctuation, as if she didn't know their identities at all. Yao would like to send my greetings to Madame Su. I am really grateful to Madame Su for her willingness to take in us, mother and son. Wen Yao showed her humility, and Su Changzhong and Su Yuking also saluted. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 100. Chapter 100. Heading to the northwest. The old lady's eyes fell on the three of them, full of deep meaning. She did not speak, and the three of them did not get up. It seemed to be giving them a warning. Until Su Changqing walked into the main hall and saw Wen Yao's slightly bent body, pity flashed in his eyes. Mother, the food is on the table, please let everyone sit down quickly. Su Changqing did not speak directly for Wen Yao, fearing that Sun Jiaro would find out. But he didn't know that Sun Jiaro had known about this for a long time. Looking at his pretentious look now, Sun Jiaro's heart became colder and colder. Then take a seat. Although the old lady was still a little dissatisfied, she couldn't show her face to her son, so she could only give instructions. Everyone sat down. Only Lu Hong and Lu Shuiying did not come. The former is still having social interactions abroad. As for Lu Shuiying is a bit cold, so I asked her to stay in the house. Su Changjing explained that, in fact, she was worried that Lu Shuiying was speaking openly, and it would be bad if she said something that would make Sun Jiaro suspicious. As for Lu Huayuan and Lu Suya, Su Changjing has already mentioned it and is not too worried. Lu Suya, who was sitting next to Su Changjing, looked at Wen Yao and the others without leaving any trace, her heart full of doubts. Can she still not know whether the Lu family has any distant relatives? Where did these three people come from? Sister-in-law, the yard where Yao and the others live looks empty. Does it need to add something? Su Changjing had a friendly air, but there was mockery in his eyes. Sun Jiaro wiped the corners of her mouth with a handkerchief and then said, they are guests and relatives of the Lu family. Naturally, they have to be treated well, but Chang Ying has to work hard. Sister-in-law, what do you mean? Su Changjing was stunned. Logically speaking, shouldn't Sun Jiaro just accept it and order someone to deal with it? Why did it become so hard for her? And, of course, the Lu family has to deal with the relatives of the Lu family. If our Su family intervenes, wouldn't it make others laugh and think that my uncle is very stingy? This will not be good for my uncle's reputation. Su Leun deliberately showed a worried look, as if he was really thinking about Su Changjing and the others. But in Su Changjing's eyes, it seemed like ridicule. Wen Yao couldn't help but take a look at Su Leun, with some considerations in her heart. This daughter-in-law who came back from the countryside doesn't seem stupid either. Su Changjing frowned. Sister-in-law, isn't this what we agreed before? Changjing, the yard is already very good, it's okay. Wen Yao smiled, and her magnanimous look made Su Changqing even more satisfied. He glanced at Sun Jiaro and said, Madam, this is a problem for you. After saying that, he looked at Wen Yao, their eyes intertwined for a moment, and then they looked away. Master Marquis, it's not that I don't want to bother, it's just. Sun Jiaro sighed softly, you also know that when Yun'er comes back, the yard needs to be decorated. I gave everything I had left to Yun'er. Where can I get anything? Come. How is that possible? Su Changqing's face darkened. Isn't your dowry quite large? Upon hearing this, Su Leun almost laughed angrily. The expression on Sun Jiaro's face was also a little unbearable. It turned out that her husband also knew that she used all her dowry. Mr. Marquis, what you said is interesting. In the past years, all the social activities and entertainments came out of my warehouse. Now when you talk about it, it seems that the things in my warehouse have been spent, and there is still no shortage. As he spoke, Sun Jiaro choked up. Su Changqing was stunned by these unceremonious words. After many years of marriage, he had never seen Sun Jiaro looking like this. But when she saw Sun Jiaro's somewhat red eyes, Su Changqing couldn't help but feel a little heartbroken. After having known each other for many years, I said the wrong thing, madam, don't get so angry. In this case, just come out of the warehouse in the house bar. Mother, what do you think? Su Changqing looked at the old lady. He knew that the warehouse in the house was still in charge of the old lady. The old lady couldn't force herself on Sun Jiaro, so she nodded. Since it's inconvenient for my daughter-in-law, just leave the house. Mother. Su Changqing was still a little unhappy. She had deliberately wanted Sun Jiaro to come out, but in the end she had become a member of the Su family. Okay, it's settled. The old lady glanced at Su Changqing dissatisfiedly, with a warning in her eyes. Seeing this, Su Changqing could only curl her lips and say nothing more. Grandma, drink some soup to warm yourself up. Su Wainer thoughtfully served a bowl of soup, which made the old lady feel relieved. Wainer is still sensible. At the dinner table, Su Changzhong and Su Yuking were very quiet and rarely moved their chopsticks. Su Changqing saw this and couldn't help but said, "This food is not to your liking, why don't you eat it?" "Hui, Master Ho, no." Su Yuking shook her head gently, swallowing the word father on her lips, her tone not aggrieved. "Master Ho, don't worry about them, these two children are just reserved." Wen Yu glanced at Su Yuking. The latter realized that her tone was not right, smiled quickly, and immersed herself in eating. A meal, everyone eats with different expressions. After dinner, the old lady called Su Changqing away. Su Leun and Su Ya accompanied Sun Jiaro back to the courtyard. As soon as he entered the room, Su Ya asked, "Mom, are those three people?" Su Ya didn't need to answer. Looking at the expressions of his mother and sister, Su Ya had an idea. He just brought the person back so openly. How can this be fair and above board? Su Leun helped Sun Jiaro sit down, it's just staying in the house. I'm going to drive them away right away. Su Leun grabbed Su Ya and said, "Listen to mother first. Your grandfather already has some clues. Your father's methods were not clean in the early years, but he still borrowed the Sun family's hand to clear up those things." Sun Jiaro took a sip of tea. "It's just that we were blind and didn't notice it before, but now these things do have an effect." Su Ya frowned and seemed a little confused. "Mom, do you mean to challenge him? This marquis also got his title with the help of our Sun family. How much he has taken away over the years, of course I want him to spit it out." When Sun Jiaro said this, her face was pale and she no longer had any nostalgia. Now in her heart, Su Leun and Su Ya are her only relatives in the entire Su family. "Brother, what's wrong with you?" Su Leun asked, looking at Su Ya's hesitant expression. Su Ya sighed and sat down on the side. "Mother, I went to Prince Jin's mansion today. After the palace banquet, the emperor will issue an order for Prince Jin and I to lead troops to the northwest." "How come?" Su Leun was startled. This had never happened in his previous life. The one who led the troops on the expedition was clearly another general, not to mention the king of Jin. Suddenly, she had a guess. Could it be that she saved Queen Jin that day and caused these things to change? Su Leun's heart was beating fast. In his previous life, when he sent troops, the general died on the battlefield. Will something happen to his brother this time? End of this chapter.